Hey everyone, so it's Hearth and welcome back to my channel. So on today's video, we're going to be talking all about taglocks, what they are and how you can use them in your magical practice. So today we're going to be talking about taglocks, what they are, why you might use them, and how you actually go about doing it. So let's start with the most simplistic question of them all. What is a taglock? A taglock is a term that's used within the witchcraft and magical community to mean an object or item that represents a person, a group, or a business. Essentially, it's an item that's used to tie spellwork, ritual, or other magical practice onto a particular target. Now I'm going to be using the term target throughout this video to mean the individual, group, or business that the working is aimed towards. I just want to make it clear here that taglocks are not used solely in one form of magic. They aren't solely used in baneful or negative magic where you want to physically target someone. They're used in many different forms of magical practice around the world for both positive and negative intention. I'm simply using the word target because saying individual, group, family, and business repeatedly is going to be very time consuming. So the word target is just being used to simplify because it's a tongue twister trying to say that sentence on repeat. But taglocks can be used for both positive and negative magic, as well as everything in between. It's simply a way of attaching spellwork and ritual to a particular target, the intended reciprocator of that spellwork and ritual, whether that be an individual person, yourself, a group, a family, a business, a company, whatever it might be. It's essentially designed to attach that working onto them. So why are taglocks used? This is probably the most asked question that I get. People will often know what a taglock is, but they don't really understand the purpose of them or when or how to use them. Not all workings need a taglock. It's actually very specific circumstances where you might need one. Generally, when we're doing spellwork and ritual, you might be doing it for yourself, in which case you're the one that's doing the working, and so you're going to be the one that's receiving the magical results. You might be doing a working that affects a space generally, so you might be casting a spell to attract friends or new opportunities, new beginnings, protections, and in which case you might not need that to attach itself onto anything in particular. You're simply trying to change the energy around you to help attract these things to you. They're often used by spellcasters who are doing their workings remotely for people who aren't present for the working. They're also used by people who want remote spells being done, so whether you're doing a spell for your friend who lives in a different country, you'll often use a taglock to attach them to that working because they aren't present. This also applies to spellwork and ritual that's aimed at a particular person, but they aren't present for that working, whether because they can't be or they don't want to be. It's also used when a person, whether that is another person or yourself, doesn't want to carry around the spell items. The spell will then still influence them even though they don't have the physical objects on them when they're walking around in their day-to-day lives. This is particularly useful if the objects are quite bulky and they don't want to carry them around. And finally, a taglock is often used if you want to attach it onto a particular target, whether that be a person, a group, a family, a business, a company, a physical location. Taglocks are really useful because you don't always want the spell or the items to be present within that environment, even if you are doing a spell for that purpose. Now those are very general examples for why you might need a taglock, but let's get a little bit more specific. If you're doing a long-term spell for yourself, and you don't want to be carrying around the objects and items that are included in that working 24/7, you might want to add a taglock into that working. This taglock is designed to attach the energy of the working onto you so that it works remotely. This is often used in bags and jars and objects and items that are quite bulky or quite difficult to carry around, and so you want that working to still continue affecting you even though you aren't in its energetic space. And so you'll often add a taglock into that working. If you're doing a remote healing spell for a friend who lives across the country or in a different country, they aren't going to be present for that working. And so if you're using a doll, you might want to add something into that doll that represents the person as a taglock so that that working will still manifest within their life, even though they might live halfway across the world. Spellcasters will often use taglocks in their workings because their clients and customers aren't present when the spell work is being done. Either that's out of choice or for the safety of the spellcaster. You'll often find that someone that does spell work for other people will request a taglock so the spell can be worked remotely. If you're trying to improve the finances of a shop, you're not necessarily going to want the ritual items in the store itself. It could be distracting and alarming to customers, especially if the shop isn't related to witchcraft and the practice of magic. And so you're going to want to do that working remotely. And to do this, you're going to want a taglock that represents the shop to attach the energy onto so that you can do that working remotely. So those are just a few more detailed examples for why you might need or want to use a taglock. But what classes as a taglock? Now, taglocks can be many different things. They are an item that represents the intended target, whether that's a person, a group, a family, an individual, or a business or company. They are an object that holds significance, that represents them so closely that you can use that as a replacement for their own presence in that working. Essentially, they are a part of them that is separate from them. Now, this can be anything from the very mundane to the very gruesome, depending on how you work, what your style of practice is, what your tradition, what your culture, and it's really important that you use what you feel comfortable with. Don't use something that is very difficult to obtain that you don't want to use. There's always another option that you can go down. Now, within taglocks, there tends to be two different avenues. You either have the bodily objects. These are items that are taken directly from a person's body, and they can be as gruesome as you might be thinking right now, but we will get into that. And then they can also be items of representation. These are not necessarily taken directly from a person, but they are designed to represent a company, a group, an individual in another way. Now, when it comes to the bodily items, we are talking saliva, urine, hair, nail clippings. We are talking blood and anything else that you can possibly think of. These are objects that are taken directly from an individual. Primarily, they are given freely, although in certain cultures and traditions, you will find that it's very common for these things to be found. Often hairs are found and then used in workings. How you choose to go about it is going to depend on your culture and your tradition. But of course, please always do so safely. A lot of the things in this category are considered biohazards and should always be done with immense, and I mean immense, precaution and care. And if you don't feel comfortable using these items, there are other options that you can use instead. But it's very common in workings for you to use a little bit of hair that you've cut off or a little bit that you've pulled out. You can use nail clippings, you can use spit. These are typically the most common ones that are used. In certain traditions, other bodily fluids are chosen more than others, and also the type that is used is going to vary depending on the working. Now, when it comes to the other types of taglocks that you can use, these are items that are typically used to represent a person without being directly from them. So things such as full names, date of birth, signatures, photographs. These can be photos that you print off the internet, or they can be professionally developed images, or they can be instant photos from those cool instant camera things. There's loads of different options there. You can also use items that belong to them, so something that has significance, whether that's something they've given you that's really important to them that you can use in that working and then give back at a later date. This could be pieces of clothing, it can be scraps of clothing, and oftentimes this is unwashed clothing, although that does vary depending on tradition and background. Now, within this, you can also go for business cards, photos of a shop or a company, logos. There's lots of different options here. Essentially, the more personal you're able to get, the more closely that working is going to be able to attach to the person or the target. And so if you can use more than one taglock, that is a fantastic way of doing it. You can blend body taglocks and item taglocks depending on what you're doing. As long as it makes sense for that working, the more information you can add into that working, the better. Which is why often in my spell videos, I will recommend names and dates of birth, because it's something that a lot of people will have access to, and it's also something that a lot of people feel comfortable with. But if you don't have those two things, you can go with other forms of taglock. It's just a case of choosing what is appropriate for that working and also what you feel comfortable and safe doing. And I'm going to reiterate it again. If you are going to be using body taglocks, particularly if it's from someone else, always take the greatest of precautions, and even if you're using your own taglocks, please make sure you're also being incredibly safe doing that too. And if in doubt, there are other options that don't require using bodily taglocks. There's lots out there, you just have to choose what's going to be more suitable for that working. Now, when it comes to taglocks, How do you actually use them? Now, a lot of people will have heard the term taglock, but they might not know how to implement that in their working. So I'm going to give you a few examples of workings that I've done that do include taglocks so that you can have an idea of how you might implement them and how you might use them in different types of working. So let's start with witches' bottles. Witches' bottles are one of the oldest forms of taglock that's found in the UK and Europe and probably elsewhere as well. They are objects that are designed to act as protection for an individual or a home. The idea being that they are a scapegoat. They contain objects and items that represent you so closely that any spirits, spell work, and negative energies that are aimed at you will instead be directed into the witch's bottle. They are a secondary version of you, an energetic duplicate that is designed to confuse, redirect, and contain negative energies. Now, when it comes to witches' bottles, traditionally the taglock that is used is urine. This goes back hundreds of years. These bottles are still being found and they're often in museums in the UK. But traditionally it's urine for two reasons. One, it's not very nice to work with, which is fantastic for a witch's bottle that is designed to capture and annoy the energy and then in turn potentially annoy the person that sent it to you. And also it acts as a taglock. So it's a very twofold use in this particular item. Within witches' bottles, you may also find hair, nail clippings. You may find blood, saliva, red wine, vinegar, urine. You'll often find pins or nails, shards of glass. Essentially, a witch's bottle is designed to attract that energy by using a taglock and then contain it and make it very rancid and horrible. And then, once it is filled to capacity, you'll often find that the witch's bottle will break, which is the sign that you then need to create a new protective bottle to replace it. So that's one form of a taglock in a very traditional working that is found over here. You also have the use of poppets. Now in the UK, the term poppet is used quite readily. It is the Old English word for puppet or a doll. Now poppets are found in one form or another in many places around the world, and they'll often use a taglock. Now, a poppet is used as a representational tool in spellwork and ritual. It is designed to represent a target, whether that be yourself or another person. Now, when it comes to poppets, it's really useful if you have a taglock for that person. It makes it far easier to attach that doll onto the target if there's something attached to that doll that represents that person very closely. And so you'll often find that taglocks are added into poppets in one of two ways. Either something is added inside the doll, such as hair, nail clippings, a photograph. It could be a signature, a date of birth, a full name, something that represents that person. The other way of adding a taglock to a poppet is to make the poppet out of a scrap of their clothes. Usually this is clothing that they're not going to use anymore. I wouldn't recommend cutting up your friend's favourite dress to be able to do this, but oftentimes a piece of clothing will be gifted to you that they no longer wear but have worn, and then the poppet is made of that piece of clothing. Often hair is added onto poppets. Usually this is done with wool or yarn, but you can also do it with actual hair from the person the poppet is aimed at, and therefore that acts as a taglock for that doll. So you can either add a taglock into the doll or poppet, or you can make the doll out of it. Some people will also sew a photograph onto the outside of the doll as representation for the person as well. There's so many different ways to do it, but primarily those are the two main techniques. Either put the taglock inside or put it outside. Primarily dry taglocks are used for this purpose because a wet taglock is not going to age particularly well. And when it comes to poppets, they're often kept for years and years. When they're in use, the energy that you imbue on the doll is going to trickle astrally into the life of the person the doll is aimed at, the target of that working. When the doll is not in use, they are commonly wrapped in black cloth and then stored in a safe space, so they can then be drawn out again if workings are needed to be made again in the future. They're often used in long distance workings. I know a lot of people will use them for healing workings on friends and family that don't live nearby. They're often used for comfort and protection of people who maybe aren't part of the craft but would like that protection granted upon them by you during that working, and they make great long-term workings. So that's another use of a long-term working. Witches' bottles are traditionally used for a year. Dolls can be used long-term, and whether you use a wet taglock or a dry taglock is going to depend on the type of working that you're doing. Now, I mentioned earlier about doing a prosperity working for a shop. Now, in some cases, it might be appropriate to have the spell items in that store, especially if it's related to what the store is. If it's a witchcraft shop, having witchcraft items is not going to be seen as something unusual. But if you have a clothing store, or a jewellery store, or a hairdresser's, you might not want your spell and ritual items to be out in the open, because as much as I would love to say that everyone is completely accepting, I think we can all agree that they aren't. And so in many cases, you're going to want to do that working remotely. Now, for me, when I'm doing prosperity workings, I will primarily use candle magic because it's fast, it's effective, and depending on the size of candle I'm using, I can have a working going for weeks and months, especially if I'm using ginormous monstrous candles. And so because of this, I'm going to need something that isn't going to burn, that isn't going to go rancid, and is going to work effectively long term to represent that shop. Bodily items for this might not be appropriate. If you're the owner, that could work really well. If you have a couple of really close employees that want to participate in that working, then it could work. But using blood, saliva, urine isn't really appropriate on a candle spell. One, it's going to smell really bad. Two, it's going to go rancid really quickly, and it just isn't nice to burn. Using hair also isn't a great option because I think we've all discovered at one point in our life that hair and fire do not go well together and they smell really bad. It also is going to burn up very quickly and isn't going to last on that working long term. So you need to find something that isn't going to burn, that isn't going to go rancid, and that's appropriate for that working. And so a business card is a great option. You don't necessarily put the business card where the fire is going to reach it, instead you place the business card underneath the working, underneath a plate or the candle holder. So it's still going to be affecting that working as a taglock, but you aren't going to run a fire risk. Now, I could go on and on forever about the different uses of taglocks, but I'm hoping that you're getting the gist of what I'm saying. If you're going to be using a jar, if you're going to be using a bottle, or something that's sealed and secure, you can use bodily taglocks that are liquid-based. If you're going to be doing a working that is designed to target an individual, they might be able to give you taglocks of bodily items such as hair or fingernails. You may also be able to use these from yourself in that working, and it isn't going to go rancid if it's not fully sealed as a liquid taglock might. But if you don't have access to bodily items and you don't want to use them, there's a plethora of other things that you can use. Use as many as you can. Ideally, more than one is best, especially if they're not bodily taglocks. So if you can, using a full name and a date of birth is great. A full name and a photograph, a date of birth and a photograph and an object that they owned. You can use an item from their house if they're able to give it to you for that particular working. And these are really good if you don't want to use bodily taglocks, if you don't have access to them, or you simply don't feel comfortable with them. These are a really good option. It's worth playing around with them, but also remember that you don't always need them. Taglocks are only really necessary when you're targeting a particular individual, group, business, shop. They aren't necessary for workings that are going to be affecting you and you're going to be present when the working is being done. They aren't necessary if that working is for a general intention, where it's going to infiltrate into your energy field rather than affecting another person or a target. Taglocks aren't always necessary. Do a bit of trial and error, see what works for you and what doesn't, when you might or might not need to use a taglock. And hopefully you'll figure out which ones work best for your style of practice and also what you feel comfortable with. Honestly, the options for taglocks are endless. Different traditions and cultures are going to use different taglocks. And so if you are part of a specific culture or tradition, it's worth looking into the folklore and traditions that you have to see what you might be able to use within your workings. So I hope that this video was useful. I hope that it taught you a little bit about taglocks and how they might be used. I know it's a short one for me, but I've had so many people asking me about this that I figured it was about time that I finally made a video on the subject. If you did like it, feel free to give it a like. It really means so much to me. If you do have any questions, comments, concerns, video ideas, or just want to chit chat with the community, feel free to put a comment down in the comment section. And if you do enjoy the magical content on this channel or in this video, feel free to hit subscribe. I try my best to post magical content every single week. I hope you have a marvelous magical day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye! Hello, everyone. Hello. The lighting is going to be a little bit different today. I was sitting in here the other night, just doing some research for future videos and surprises that are going to be coming up. And all of a sudden, my ceiling light, like the big light in the room, decided it wanted to go absolutely nuts. We're talking like flashing disco lights, it's going bananas on me, and then it just dies. And I have yet to be able to put another bulb in, so I'm down a light for filming. So we're just going to have to hope that this is good enough because I don't have the patience to get the stepladder out of the basement. And there's also lots of spiders down there. And although I don't mind spiders, I don't really want them on me. So we're just gonna have to tolerate with the light being a little bit not great. Okay, it's gonna be a short video. We'll be fine. It's only 1 and a bit sides, though to be fair, this isn't like a full script. This is just like here, have some bullet points that you can try to remember things from. So yeah, there's that. Anyway. And so in a lot of cases, you're going to be in many cases, you're going to be want to be, wow. These can be printed off the internet, or they can be professional. What am I after? What's the word I'm after? Processed, printed, no. What were they called? What is it called where you take a reel of film in and you get it done? Why can I not remember this word? Like, actually, why can I not remember this word? Developed. Okay, that's the word I'm after. We played Trivial Pursuit last night with my parents, and there was just so much talking, and I failed miserable at it because it was the 1983 edition of Trivial Pursuit, and if you've ever played that particular edition of Trivial Pursuit and you were not born in the 1950s, you are doomed to fail. And we just talked so much that now I'm like losing my voice, so we're gonna have to excuse that. I don't have a sore throat, I don't have a cough, I just can't talk today. Apparently, that's what I get for getting really annoyed at me failing a Disney question in Trivial Pursuit. I failed a Pinocchio question in Trivial Pursuit. How did I do that? I have no idea. I also failed a basic maths question, which really frustrated me. It was about diameters of a pipe, and I still failed it. Even though I knew the answer, I still said the wrong thing. I'm still annoyed about it, even now. Moving on. Let's just keep going. But my voice is screwed, and I do know why, but like, I don't want it to be screwed, you know? My camera overheated like 4 times, and when my camera overheats, I lose footage, and I've got no idea what I lost, and I'm just desperately hoping that I have a cohesive enough sentence that I will be able to patch it together where it overheated. But yeah, let's hope for the best, because it's Tuesday, this has got to go out tomorrow, I've got to be editing all afternoon, it's freaking hot today. I thought it was autumn. I was there getting my Halloween decorations out, getting my blankets out, getting my candles lit. Boom, heat wave. It's the start of September. It's September the 6th, something like that, 7th. And it's like 26 degrees and I'm absolutely boiling. And I was all prepped for autumn, all prepped for Halloween. Nope, summer. The world just went, you know what? How about we give you summer in September? Please no. So I am absolutely roasting. These filming lights are so freaking hot. So hopefully I can get this edited in one go, and hopefully it's cohesive. Right, I am going to show you what my light looks like right now, what it's doing, the craziness of what it's doing. So I'm just going to give a flashing lights warning right here, because that's how bad this light is. Okay, you ready? Flashing lights warning. Okay. I have no words. This is what my light has been doing recently. My entire house has just been having electrical problems right now. And, oh, now you decide to work, do you? Thank you very much. It's been doing that for the last 4 days. And it's driving me insane. Oh, no, never mind. Poof, gonna get, oh. It can't make its mind up. So this entire video I've had no ceiling light because it keeps doing that. It's infuriating. I'll just be sitting in here at night and the light will be fine, and then all of a sudden it'll go, ha, tricked you. And next thing you know, it's like a fucking disco in here. It's like, it's gone off again. Oh, ow, blinded. Okay, I'm gonna go. But yeah, that is what my light has been doing, which is why my videos are gonna look a little bit weird until I get it fixed. So I'm gonna turn this off now. This is really, really annoying.